Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, February 7th, 2017. I'm a little bit distracted. Producing and directing Saturday Night Live for the rest of the season. I wish that were the case. It's not, but I have some suggestions. I know, I don't know whether anybody is really open to suggestions like this. I would assume that the people who write this stuff professionally don't want to hear anything from anybody about what's funny, but I'm taken aback this morning by reports that came out last night, and I don't even know whether I put them aside. It's hard to tell. Sometimes at night, just laying there alone, as I'm reading the day's news over again, as we're winding down. Let's see, last night's news, I was reading about how angry Trump was about the Sean Spicer spoof on last week's Saturday Night Live, Melissa McCarthy's portrayal of Sean Spicer. Although, well, I don't know, how did they put it? I mean, did I put it aside? I don't know. You've likely heard the story by now. And I guess I can't quite figure out, even from reading it, exactly what the problem was and how it manifested itself. But the gist of it seemed to be that Trump was troubled in some way by the fact that Spicer, who's male, if you haven't been watching, was portrayed by a woman, a female actor. I don't know. I never have really been comfortable with using the female word. Not that I'm afraid of talking about females. It's just I don't understand how that happened, how we stopped saying portrayed by a woman, and people picked up on the weird habit of saying portrayed by a female, which seems, I don't know, are we all cops that we know all now are talking about this? Anyway, she's a woman. Women are female. Yes, we get that part. Okay, anyway, somehow that was so disturbing to Donald Trump. And it's there are so many levels on which this is bizarre. I understand they get upset about when people in their White House, Trump himself or anyone close to him, is portrayed with any ridicule. But for some reason, I guess because he's so hyper male, Donald Trump is, and so worried about that sort of thing, he became convinced that. And again, when I say I couldn't understand exactly how this manifested itself, I can't quite tell whether, like, Trump himself had declared this somehow some horrible setback for the White House because the premise is the same each time, no matter exactly the manifestation. The idea was, if a woman portrays this male character, this male person, this real life male person, then that's horrible and emasculating, and it makes you look weak, and I guess by extension makes him look weak, Trump, that is, because he selected Sean Spicer for this job, which is supposed to project power in some way, and he had failed so badly at projecting power that he had led the writers at Saturday Night Live to portray him with a woman actor. And that's so psychotic, I don't even know where to start with that, as evidenced by the fact that I didn't know where to start this show. Anyway, it's really nutty, and it leads me to the conclusion, obviously, that every single week, I would say every sketch, and I would say now for the whole season. So this is it. Ready? Every show for the rest of the season, and really for the rest of the 4 years, or as long as it takes to, be rid of Trump one way or the other. However you do it. That's it. It's all Trump. And it doesn't even really, I won't make it too much work for the writers. It doesn't have to be that Trump as Trump in every sketch either. You could start that way, certainly. And when you burn out on it, just throw a random Trump in, or just have the cast do the regular show, whatever you've scripted anyway, but in Trump wigs. I don't know. Just it hardly even matters. And every once in a while, don't even be consistent within the sketch. Just throw on a Trump voice if you can do it. And if you can't do it, so much the better. Who cares? You do a terrible Trump, you can't do a real Trump imitation, you do it half-assed, do it ridiculous. Whatever you want, it doesn't matter. The worse, the better, in a manner of speaking. I'd say do it as long as you can and keep going. Look at this. My whole Twitter feed today is they must have gone on a verification kick. Everybody I know or everybody I'm following is verified all of a sudden, except me. I don't think so. And it's weird. Is this new? Or just, I don't know, are more verified people speaking up today? I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, so that's my message to Saturday Night Live. If you're writing for Saturday Night Live, let's say, and you're listening to this show, what are you doing? Get back to work. But if you are, and you're saying, oh, sure, that's just great. You're just going to make my life hell, make me write these ridiculous things. You just throw out this concept, and I'll just write it because that's what writers do. They can just do anything. Well, I believe in you. I trust you. You can do it. And if you need help, call me. I will not leave my house, but I will worry about you personally. So it's like having my thoughts and prayers. I'll come by and I'll help you write the thing. I don't know how it would work, but I don't know. I do 2 hours every day, so I can get an hour and a half for you once a week. How about that? Just and that would take care of the donation problem. I assume you pay your writers, and then we'd be in good shape, and I'd have a lot of fun, and Donald Trump would go crazy and maybe have an aneurysm, and then we'd be done with the guy, I guess, once and for all. Let's see. Oh, Bill in Portland, Maine, in addition to waking us up with the morning tweet today, he notes that Monty Python did that a lot, interrupting their sketches with a ridiculous intrusion by characters not related to that sketch. See? It has a comedy history, a pedigree, if you will. If you won't, then go with history, because pedigree is a big word, and maybe Donald Trump doesn't understand it. Let's see. Last night I also saw, let me see if I can scroll back here a little bit, too, because I didn't, I missed my chance to read Bill's morning tweet, and I like to do that, and I get upset when I find out I forgot. Here it is. Daily Kos Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. In case you are working for Saturday Night Live and you say, well, how do I contact this guy? That's not really the answer, but that's my name. That's who you write how do I pay this guy? There we go. Now we're talking. Daily Kos Radio is live now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, makes a case for locking Jeff Sessions in the cellar until the DeVos vote ends. That's not a bad idea. I saw that in, what movie did they do that? Elizabeth, right? They locked the bishops in the basement, in the little, what is that? Whitehall Palace dungeon, I guess? I don't know. Anyway, it's not a bad idea. Today is the day, I reminded you yesterday, that Betsy DeVos will come up for a confirmation vote. It's expected around 12:30. That will be the expiration of the 30 hours of post-cloture debate time. The Democrats put on a nice show and spoke around the clock to keep the floor for all 30 hours. Did they have to do that? Well, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But if the Republicans wanted to strictly apply the rules, and this is one of the ways you would try and speed things up a little bit, is you could say, all right, well, you got up to 30 hours of post-cloture debate, but if at any point speakers yield the floor and no one seeks time to speak, then I'm just going to hold the vote then and there. So you got to line up your speakers around the clock, and remember, no one can speak every senator gets an hour initially, or can claim up to an hour of the 30 that are available, though you can yield your hour or more to another senator. So in the end, one senator could do, 2, 3, 4 hours, however many they feel like doing. And, it could be, it can become a real tedious exercise, but it was a good opportunity for Democrats to put together a dry run for when things will get tough and they'll start demanding that we speak around the clock. And it's a good show, and it's a good nominee to do it for, because it's going to be a close vote. And of course, let's see. This morning we expect that, I guess with Murkowski and Collins becoming deeply troubled about Betsy DeVos's nomination, it's expected to be a 50-50 tie. And I guess this is, it's said to be something like the first time in history, but I read an interesting anecdote about it this morning. Look at all these verified people all of a sudden. Holy mackerel. I'm so distracted looking at the screen here. Everybody. All right. Something's going on here. I feel left out. Anyway, let's see. So everybody did an admirable job staying up late and speaking because to run out the 30-hour clock, and it's expected to be the first time that a vice president breaks the tie on a cabinet nominee. Although I did see an anecdote tweeted out this morning that in 1925 or thereabouts, a nominee for, gosh, I should have put this one aside. It's such a good historical anecdote. A nominee for Attorney General was facing a tie vote, and the vice president was summoned, and he didn't make it in time, basically. And actually, as he finally entered the chamber, it was a 40-40 tie back in those days, 40-40, you see. And but as soon as he walked in the chamber and was available to break the tie, one of the 40 Democrats switched his vote and killed the nomination 39-41, and the vice president never got a chance to cast that vote, and that was the end of it. I guess that was the last time that one of them should have had the opportunity, but never got around to doing it. So that's a historical footnote. The vote was changed, and they never had to break the tie. So that's, I guess, how the streak continued. All right. Well, I'm extraordinarily distracted by the number of verified people speaking to me this morning. I don't know if you noticed the same thing, but all the reporters that I follow, and they've had a long history of verifying the reporters for some reason, but now I don't know, there's a new batch of verifications out there. I'd love to know, sort of, I don't know how interesting it really would be, but what is the criteria over there? Because there are some people who are verified that I say, of course, you have to verify that person. That's a famous person, and you want to be sure that you're talking to the real one. Others, I say, well, I see they've got a job in media, but I don't know who the hell they are, and neither does anyone else because they have 25 followers. But they're verified. It's important to note. Okay. Well, let's see. Anyway, that's not particularly important. But what is important is we have to catch Ricky up with the show. She says, hey, when I miss the first few minutes of Kagro in the morning, I always feel like I'm a little out of the loop for the rest of the 2 hours. Trust me, I'm out of the loop for the 2 hours myself, although it is important to set the stage first thing in the morning. Okay. Well, Justice tells me everything is A-okay, but he's making lots of news and cultural references in his notes to me today. Let's see. Bowling Green interlude, definitely underreported. Yes, playing that music, it is underreported. That's the other big story, I guess, of yesterday. Nothing really jumped out and took the lead and grabbed my attention yesterday. Yesterday was he was busy trying to create stories, but I just wasn't impressed. I guess the big news from yesterday was his stop at an Air Force base down in Florida on his way, I guess, back from Mar-a-Lago and up to Washington, D.C., at which he stopped and, gave his stupid standard stump speech, which is really not the thing to do as president on a military base, etc. But he began making the claim, and I guess trying to play off of Kellyanne Conway's nonsense about the Bowling Green massacre, which only got worse for her yesterday, by the way, as two other media outlets discovered that she had made the same quote-unquote slip of the tongue, the same mistake that she was claiming. Oh, get off my back. I made a mistake. I said massacre when I really meant, the procurement of weapons, etc. They were masterminding an attack overseas, somewhere else, etc. It doesn't really, it never made any sense. But then it turns out that she had spoken to 2 other outlets and given them basically the same line and used the massacre word. So the idea that it was a mistake, well, she just kept making that mistake over and over and over again. Anyway, then Trump makes his way over to the Air Force Base, and he tried to play off that line, essentially saying that there were some enormous number of terrorist attacks that people didn't know about because the biased, lying media never tells anybody about them. Why? Because they're obviously all on the side of publicity-hungry ISIS. ISIS that exists for nothing if not generating publicity about itself, had suddenly let its collaborators in the media know that they didn't want any credit for anything ever and didn't want to have it reported. And that's the big conspiracy. Of course, people began to ask, what attacks could you possibly be talking about? And they started to put it to Sean Spicer. What's he talking about? What sort of attacks happened that the media didn't report? And then they moved the goalposts and said, well, we meant underreported. All right, well, what attacks have happened that have been underreported? Oh, well, we'll get back to you with a list. You want a list? Fine, we'll give you a list. I didn't bring one with me. I mean, duh. And then they spent the day trying to generate that list, and they basically looked up on Wikipedia, when have there been terrorist attacks? And they just spat this list back, and 3/4 of the list happened overseas. Less than a quarter, I think, of the attacks actually happened in the United States. And of those that happened in the United States, about half or more of them were perpetrated by, as they put it, U.S. persons. That is to say, nobody that would have been prevented by the Muslim ban. Of course, I see every once in a while anecdotes about people who are, in fact, U.S. persons falling under the falling prey to the Muslim ban anyway, which of course suggests that it is in fact a Muslim ban and has nothing to do with safety or even these 7 countries or people born there or who had traveled there. They're just capturing everybody. Anyway, so that was the upshot of their stupid list. Was it illustrated almost none of their point. And, of course, all of those attacks had, in fact, been reported, and I guess it's now a subjective question about whether they've been under-reported or not. So, all right, fine. Basically, the existence of Egypt is apparently an under-reported terrorist attack. That's what I took away from at the ridiculous, when the list came out. I don't know. No one's really certain what he was talking about. Ricky says that he was talking about the attack at the Louvre, but that's possible, but I know about that one because it was widely reported in major news outlets everywhere. Let's see. Judd Legum is addressing the issue now with his new verified stamp. I don't know how new that is. Who cares? I don't know why I'm so hung up on that. It's very disturbing. It's distracting to see those stupid checks now flying up and down. Now I'm fixated on it. Trump's list of underreported attacks contains 0 perpetrated by white supremacists or Islamophobes. That's true, too. Of course, we knew that was going to be the case when the other day he ordered that the study of terrorist attacks purposefully exclude those perpetrated by white supremacist homegrown terrorists. Those don't count. He only wants ones perpetrated by Muslims and other foreigners, and also Muslims. Okay. Boy, there's a lot going on. Oh, yes. Let's see. Here's the next bit of news here. Where should we go with this one? None of these stories struck me as particularly as so outrageous or beyond the pale that I put them aside. But another of the things being talked about, now I'm going to have to go and look these things up and get links to provide to Scott, although maybe we've got some handy. I don't know. Scott is pretty handy at coming up with his own links, as it turns out. And I can appreciate that. That's a job by itself, finding links for all these things. I just hear these things and I talk to you about it. Melania Trump back in the news. Again, she reappeared on the news scene. She's suing, and I don't know who. Who cares? The premise of the suit, as I understand it, is, okay, somebody said or alleged that she had once worked as an escort. And that's not nice if you're not an escort. I mean, if you are an escort, then good, that's advertising. We're not here to shame the sex workers. It's just she didn't want anybody to think that she had worked as an escort, and I can understand that, despite the fact that you're not supposed to shame sex workers. But she's not on that page with us, and who cares? Anyway, the allegation is not so much that was a lie, although it's alleged that it's a lie, but that the allegation was going to cost her millions of dollars. How? Because she's now First Lady. And as she was saying, she was going to be one of the most photographed women in the world as First Lady. And sometimes that can be true. You can be, I think there are other people who photograph more often. It's just true. But you're going to be very frequently photographed. And she considered that to be a marketing opportunity. As one of the most photographed women in the world, I could wear various fashions and accessories and then market them as the fashions or accessories that I, Melania Trump, First Lady of the United States, FLOTUS, if you will, and most photographed woman in the world, am wearing. And wouldn't you, in, let's say, Bowling Green, Kentucky, like to have the same dress or $10,000 bangle? Well, now you can, minus your ability to pay for it, but that's never stopped me. You can, and these are the millions of dollars she's missing out on, the opportunity to capitalize on being First Lady, which really, honestly, is beyond the pale ever, but she believes it's something that she's actually entitled to. Plus, of course, it's weird that, I'll be one of the most photographed women in the world because I'm First Lady of the United States. Well, this is, as I said, is frequently the case, but also frequently the case, the First Lady lives in the White House and accompanies the president on his jaunts outside of the White House. Not all of them, but some of them. Whereas you live in New York City and never leave Trump Tower. So that one of the things that has to happen in order for you to become the most photographed woman in the world is you've got to leave Trump Tower, and preferably in the presence of the president, who they're really trying to photograph. And I don't know. So I don't know how much her damages really are if she's not going to live, cohabit with the president and accompany him on these trips. Every once in a while she'll be, photographed waiting at the bottom of the Air Force steps from Air Force One at West Palm Beach Airport, waiting for him to go to, that's not going to cut it. Anyway, also occupying a lot of the media time and Trump's time yesterday, he was very upset about the New York Times piece that we referenced yesterday. That would be the Trump and staff rethink tactics after stumbles piece. They sit in the dark because they don't know where the light switches are. And Trump is out of the West Wing by 6:30 and is upstairs watching TV in a bathrobe or what have you. They dispute the bathrobe thing. Sean Spicer says, I don't think the president even owns a bathrobe. And Carolyn Fiddler from, where is she now? DLCC? I think that's the case. Anyway, she had a good observation. I don't want to know. As long as I live, I hope I live the rest of my life without finding out how Sean Spicer came to know that Trump doesn't own a bathrobe. I don't know how you can tell what this guy does and doesn't own. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't hang out in the bathrobe. I got no idea. Pictures circulating of him, of course, from his younger days in a bathrobe, but maybe he's since sold that bathrobe to a Saudi prince, for all I know, and for $1 billion. And now he no longer owns a bathrobe. I don't know. I don't know. Who cares? But that seemed to be the sticking point. Not that he was leaving the office at 6:30 and watching television. It was what does he wear when he goes. That's how on the ball these guys are. Okay. Let's see. So many things to catch up on today. Let me see if I can gather my wits about me at some point. And maybe this would be a great opportunity then to honor the note I have left for myself to please, please, please get around to playing Rosalind McGregor's latest dispatch from Michigan about the upcoming Michigan elections. That's a big switch in directions, but it might as well be, because the president, as much time as he occupies in everybody's head, including his own, he's not getting anything in particular done. Yesterday was kind of a waste of time in terms of his occupying people's minds. I don't know. He fell flat in my view. So, okay, we'll let Rosalind tell us something that's really important.
Good morning, David. I have an update from Michigan for your listeners. Today, I'd like to share information about the voting process. Your listeners will recall that Michigan was one of the states that Jill Stein's campaign asked for a recount last month. That recount showed a number of problems, but for this coming year, there is good news. Michigan will spend up to $82 million on new voting machines. From Michigan Radio, more than a decade since Michigan last replaced its voting machines, the state is spending up to $82 million on new voting machines over the next 2 years. You know they're computers, right, says Chris Thomas, the Michigan elections director, and like any kind of hardware and software, they've got a shelf life. It's pretty standard across the country that 10 years is when you start reaching that outer limit and start seeing a few more problems on election day and whatnot. But Thomas says problems that turned up in the partial recount of Michigan's 2016 ballots cast had more to do with training than technology. There aren't many complaints about the current aging machines malfunctioning, he says. You know, if we waited a couple more election cycles, you would then be hearing that. I believe that it might start to impact the integrity, Thomas says. Let me interject here with the news articles from the recount last month. From Detroit Metro's recount, in Wayne County, officials must decide what to do with 610 precincts, including 392 in Detroit, where the numbers don't match. Oakland County has concluded that at least 17 precincts won't be recounted, and in Macomb County, at least 7 are ineligible. That's not good, conceded Daniel Baxter, elections director for the city of Detroit. He blamed the discrepancy on the city's decades-old voting machines, saying 87 optical scanners broke on election day. Many jammed when voters fed ballots into the scanners, which can result in erroneous vote counts if ballots are inserted multiple times. Poll workers are supposed to adjust counters to reflect a single vote, but in many cases fail to do so, causing the discrepancies, Baxter said. Okay, back to the info on the new machines. These new machines will still optically scan paper ballots filled out by voters, Thomas says, but they'll be more reliable and have updated operating systems. The first machines could be in place in time for the August primaries, with all of them up and running for the 2018 race. Meanwhile, a report is expected to be released in the next week or two that looks specifically at Election Day problems in Detroit. So what problems did the recount point out? From Michigan Radio, at the same time, another story is clearly emerging. Precincts that cannot be recounted because of Michigan's recount law, which dates back to 1954. Under Michigan's recount law, if there are discrepancies between the numbers recorded in a given precinct's poll book on election night and the number of ballots collected for that precinct, the precinct is not eligible for a recount. But this begs the question, if the numbers aren't matching, shouldn't that be a reason to recount the ballots? All of Michigan election law is sort of an exploration in history. You would think that, said Mark Grebner of Practical Political Consulting. He is a longtime political consultant and election observer in Michigan. He's also an incoming Ingham County commissioner and a Democrat. But the results of Michigan law is that the worse that the precinct was run on election day, the more confused they were, the more ballots they lost track of. That is a precinct you can't count. But if the precinct was run perfectly, then you can count them. Part of the problem, Grebner explained, is that the Michigan voting law is out of date. All of Michigan election law is sort of an exploration in history. I think that the law was recoded in 1954, but I think it actually dates to the 1870s, which is to say nothing of Michigan's vote counting system, which, according to Grebner, is actually really bad. It makes errors in any given race in about 0.25% of all ballots. In other words, if you count 1,000 ballots, you're going to get 2 or 3 errors in every precinct that has 1,000 ballots. The news reports from the recount last month listed these reasons precincts couldn't be recounted. Some ballot bags were damaged in transit. Some bags ripped at the seam when workers simply picked them up by the handles. Some plastic seals were damaged when another bag was stacked on top of the first bag. And bags were not counted because the seal number did not match the number that had been recorded in the poll book. And ballot bags could not be recounted because they were sealed using devices that were not state approved. The recount was halted before many Michigan counties got their recounts underway, but all counties that had started showed problems. While the worst numbers were in Detroit and Wayne County, Ingham County, Genesee County, Kent County, and Kalamazoo County all had precincts that couldn't be recounted. In Michigan, the elected county clerk is the person who decides what brand and model of voting equipment is used in all the precincts. It's up to the local municipality to purchase and maintain equipment and make sure they have enough to service their residents. Like any other local government spending, voting equipment has to compete for tax dollars against street repairs, public safety, and other essential services. So that's what I have for your Michigan correspondent update, David. It's back to you.
All right. Thanks very much. Those are some bizarre stories. So I always love, I love process stories. And whenever you get sort of the, what would we say, 50,000 foot overview of things like they can't count the votes right. And you wonder, how hard could it be? There's votes that say, for Clinton, and there's ballots that say Trump. Just count the damn things, and then when you get right down to it, you run into exactly how many problems can arise, and then how stupid the process can be, and then how dumb the law defining the process can be, and the idea, and then ending up with something like you were saying, the worse the operation in the county, the less likely you will be to be able, under the law, to recount the county, which is backwards. And then, of course, other stupid problems like, one of the seals popped open, or you closed the box with something that isn't an approved device. It's amazing how many places there are to go wrong. Parleo from over in Yield, Europa, says, well, what is the advantage of voting machines in the first place? I can't say any. Here's a photo of volunteers counting votes in the UK. That's true. I do see that it's a photo. You should send me a picture of the outside of your passport as proof. That's the only way you can prove anything to me, like Michael Cohen does. What's the advantage of voting? I mean, I guess it's just it's the counting and the speed. And supposedly, I'm sure when we first jumped into this was, well, the machines, they won't make a mistake. Of course, we find out that they do for various reasons. It's usually a human error somewhere along the line, but there is an error rate. I guess we love the speed of getting those returns, but if we can't get them right, what's the point? I don't know. Things spun out of control very soon after we decided to experiment with machines. And vote counting, I guess, maybe like the Scantron sheets that they use here in Virginia, I guess are perhaps a little less troubling than the paperless ballot, the electronic voting machine idea, because you can't tell what's in the coding and whether or not the things have been counted correctly. But I don't know. I guess it was all about speed, and that's all there is to it, and this abiding belief that nothing, the machines can't make a counting error. But again, we're reminded that there are many places in the process, many places along the road to getting the machine to count the paper we provide it, where we can make mistakes and cause all kinds of errors. Not to mention the fact that you could just have a malfunctioning machine, period. Anyway, we got all kinds of things to turn to today. Maybe today is a great day to hit on lots of other random or tangential stories that we skipped over in previous days and clear out some of the pocket queue. There's a lot to it, along with a lot, hanging out of my throat today. We'll try and work through that. Let's see. One of the things that I got sent the other day, I have two things I think queued in terms of suggestions for good stories from Brian Monroe, our friend Canuck Pundit on Twitter. And let's see, we'll dive into at least one of them. One more follow-up comment now from Parleo. With human counters, a mistake is small scale, With a machine, it can be huge. That's true. One of the problems with counting by machine, as fast as it is, for one thing, it can make that just makes it possible for the machine to make more mistakes in a minute than a human is capable of making. But of course, a human will likely during that minute give some indication that a mistake has been made and go back and correct it, whereas the machine just churns on. It can be an hour before you discover that the machine's got it wrong and has always had it wrong. There's a lot of reasons not to do it by machine, but I don't know. For some reason, we don't want to do that, and I don't know. I wonder if it's how much of it is driven by the demand from television networks to have some results to report and to do it fast. It's clearly was originally driven by speed. I don't know what else. I mean, I guess there's some partisan concerns in terms of like, what if the people cheat? What if they're all Republicans and they just start lying about what they've got and what they've been reading and how many they've been counting of various things? Anyway, I guess that's a concern too, but then you have a verification process. You have, this crowd of people that's there, give them each 100 ballots to sort, and then they got to pass it to the person to their left, and they count it, or whatever, random swap. And the batch numbers are matched, and if there's a discrepancy in the count on any given batch, I guess that could lead to a lot of problems too, but it can be done with humans. That's the way it was done for most of voting history, I guess. Anyway, moving on to Brian Monroe's first suggestion. He says, here's a great story for you, and it is indeed from a Canadian news source, because he's Canadian. Not that he can't read outside of Canada. Just he's among the numerous Canadians who are probably rightly concerned with how little we all here in America know about Canada. And maybe those of you living along the northern tier know more about Canada. I don't know. Or you might be more ignorant of Canada. I'm not really sure. Anyway, this is a story. This is a baby step into it. Here's a Canadian story about us. We can handle that, right? This is a piece entitled Trump Regrets. Nova Scotia student, that's Canada, for those of you who didn't know. Nova Scotia student compiles U.S. voters' sober second thoughts. I don't know how sober they were necessarily, but clearly more sober than they were on election day or whenever they voted. Perhaps they voted early. Let's see. CTV News has this piece. Oh, and it's in mobile format at that. So that means I can walk around while I read it to you, I think. What are the sober second thoughts? I do not know. A Twitter account that compiles regretful tweets of Americans who voted for U.S. President Donald Trump. I like how they have to refer to him that way. Out there. Here we can just say President Donald Trump. There they have to say that other country, the one that we all know about and they don't know anything about us. U.S. President Donald Trump. So here are the regrets. The Twitter account has surged in popularity thanks to the wit of its unlikely creator, a Nova Scotia University student. Erica Baguma. I don't know how badly I'm ruining that one. Baguma. A student at the University of King's College in Halifax, created at Trump _, in case you're trying to find it, at Trump _ regrets, after the president announced that he wouldn't reopen an investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server, a scandal that became a source of mistrust among many voters and swayed some of the vote for Trump. And for Stein, for that matter, I guess we could say that. Okay, let's see. I figured if so many people voted for him for this one reason, there's probably a lot of other single-issue voters, so I decided to start keeping track, Baguma told CTV Atlantic. Through clever retweets, cheeky memes, and plenty of caps lock rage, the account has garnered more than 143,000 followers. High-profile endorsements from TV producer Dan Harmon and billionaire investor Chris Sacca, or Sacca, how does he say it? I say CCA? Sacca, if you're Italian, but okay. And follows from Rosie O'Donnell and Mark Cuban have helped stoke the following too. Baguma is humble about the account's popularity and says she only spends about 15 minutes each day looking for vitriolic tweets to profile. Obviously, it's not me. I'm not doing anything. I'm just retweeting people, but it's fun to interact with these people, she said. Here's one. There are several. Would you like to hear them? You're going to. Linda Williams, the name of the person who tweeted this one, To Donald Trump, I voted for you expecting someone to shake up D.C., but was wrong. I regret voting for you. Your Muslim ban is despicable. Well, that's an interesting one. Let's see. Lisa O'Malley. Is it worth telling you what these people's actual Twitter addresses are? I don't think you're going to follow them. Some of them are weird. Swordfish Parm. That's kind of funny. Anyway, Lisa O'Malley says, after realizing I supported and voted for real Donald Trump, I am never drinking again. Worst drunk decision I ever made. Hashtag impeach Trump. I have a feeling that one might be fake, but who knows? Let's see. Oh, here's a verified account, for God's sake. Keem. I'm a Trump supporter, and I really hate this Muslim ban. Can we please walk this back? Donald Trump, real Donald Trump. It does not feel right. Who's Keem? I wonder, that strikes me as maybe it might be short for Hakeem or Akeem or something like that. Who is Keem? He is the creator. He's verified. I told you. Creator of Drama Alert. #1 source for news on the social interactions in online entertainment. And our Discord. Discord.gg. No clue. A 1.3 million follower account, however. From Buffalo, New York. Drama Alert. What does he do? I have no idea. Anyway, I'm scanning the Twitter feed. I can't tell you what this is about. I got no idea. It looks like he's into some wrestling and playing some games and something. I really haven't got the slightest idea what any of this might be about. But oh well, he's got 1 million plus followers, so something. People are into weird stuff. Okay, let's see, what else have we got here? Here is someone, Roman Scheidt, I'm guessing, Pscheidt, holy mackerel, responding to a Donald Trump tweet in late January, the one about, says, Trump tweets, senators should focus their energies on ISIS, illegal immigration, and border security instead of always looking to start World War III. And he responds, you stack your cabinet with everyone rich, not a common man among. You're an embarrassment. I want my vote back. There's also someone who tweets as the worst. God, I wish I never voted for you. You're such a liar. You are ruining the country and the lives of good people. Sad. I don't know how much of them are real, but it's interesting to see. Anyway, a Canadian social media analyst says he wouldn't be surprised if Trump regrets hits 1 million followers. It shows the power of social media and how quick something that resonates with people can really take off and get a life of its own, said Ross Simmons. As Trump faces backlash over a series of recent decisions, including a ban on travelers from 7 Muslim-majority countries, Baguma says her work is cut out for her. I figure I'll just keep going as long as the regrets keep coming, she said. Okay. Well, it's an avocation. I can tell you that. If you if you want to work together in some way on stories of people who regret voting for Trump and then accidentally shoot themselves, we could really have something together. So call me. It's an international call, but I think rates are considerably lower than they used to be in the old days. Anyway, moving along, we see there are a couple of other things we can jump into here. I know there's something I wanted to bring up the other day, and it's kind of oldish news, but I imagine it's still sort of happening. Where would I find this thing? Yes. Okay. I guess when Australia was, I think this is this was reported prior to, I think, Trump's call to the Australian Prime Minister, which of course wouldn't need translation help because ostensibly they both speak English. And yet, they were concerned about this one. This is a really interesting thing from sbs.com.au. SBS, I'm not familiar with Australian media. I know Australian Broadcasting Company, ABC, confuses me all the time. But anyway, SBS, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it's awesome, and it's also Australian. So that's sort of alliteration, and we'll go with that. That makes it interesting enough. Now, this is a great story, though. Translators are struggling to interpret Donald Trump. At least some of these phone calls have to have some translation at some point going on, even though most people who end up as world leaders Well, very often they're very fluent in English. They've been educated in English for a long time, and our leaders, just like we don't know anything about Canada, we don't hardly ever have presidents who speak another language fluently. However, the rest of the world has got that, and, well, they put us to shame once again. Anyway, that's not the actual point of this article. Translators are struggling to interpret Donald Trump. This is from back on January 24th, but in Australia. So who even knows what date it was when it was really written here in the United States. And one of the problems, of course, for people, imagine, you immediately begin to anticipate the problem. English speakers, American English speakers, probably don't have a terrific idea most of the time what the hell Donald Trump is saying or what he's even talking about. Imagine trying to translate it into a foreign language, which is difficult enough to do when someone is coherent and speaks in complete sentences that make sense, unlike me. And you can see in the subhead here exactly what they're talking about. Run-on sentences and disjointed syntax have created an ethical dilemma for interpreters. I imagine interpreting this show would be next to impossible as well, not just for all the disjointed thoughts, but the various weird cultural references, puns, and outright non sequiturs would make it awfully difficult. Anyway, where were we? Oh, right at the beginning, that's right. Ben Windsor is the writer here for the Australian outlet SBS, I guess, whatever that is. I'm sure it's awesome, too, and I don't mean to downplay it. Anyway, translators around the world reported that it's a struggle to accurately interpret Donald Trump's speeches, statements, and interviews, a challenge which shows no sign of abating, as the dominant newsmaker assumes the world's most influential office. For translators, Trump is an unprecedented and desolating struggle. That's an interesting, desolating struggle. Did you run that through Google Translate somehow? Wrote professional translator, oh my goodness, it's French. Let's see, Bérengère Viennot. I'll give you the link. You can all look at it. And those of you who speak French will say, oh my God, that's horrible. Anyway, that's what this translator said. I'm serious. In the French version of Slate last month. I didn't even realize they had a French version of Slate. In the widely circulated article, Ms. Viennot, it's Viennot, Viennot, I'm guessing, lamented the president's disjointed syntax, run-on sentences, and limited vocabulary. That is difficult to deal with. When it comes to speaking of something other than his victory, and he rarely does do that, right? When it comes to speaking of something other than his victory, he clings desperately to the words contained in the question put to him, without succeeding in completing his own thought, she wrote. The poverty of the vocabulary is striking, and I agree. It absolutely is. It's jarring when you hear him speak. Ricky lets us know that up in Canada, of course, they have two official languages. We don't even have one. That's true. Nothing that's official, but that keeps the door open for anything. But even if you consider English to be our official language, not everybody here speaks it. And I'm not just saying that about immigrants. I'm saying I don't know what it is that Donald Trump is using. Anyway, Ms. Viennot, who is a fan of the newly inaugurated leader. Oh, I'm sorry, isn't a fan. Good Lord, imagine being labeled incorrectly. Isn't a fan of the newly inaugurated leader. Says that as a translator, Mr. Trump's speech puts her in an ethical dilemma. If she translates him directly, French listeners may struggle to understand. But if she translates him into smoother, intelligible speech, she risks making him sound like an ordinary politician who speaks properly. And as you know, that ain't right. There's a tweet here embedded in this piece from Laura Schneider, who writes, Trump gives, or who tweets a quote from someone. It says, Trump gives me outbreaks of sweat. His German translator says. I'm not certain whether that hasn't been accurately translated, but okay. He is so contradictory that people think the translator talks rubbish. That makes considerably more sense to Australians than to Americans. We know what rubbish is, but it's not something we often say. That somebody talks rubbish. But how about that? They must. I mean, that's one of the ethical dilemmas. You just translate them straight up, and it may be that people in that country don't understand that Donald Trump is a dolt, and you end up translating them directly, and people say, that is the dumbest translator ever. Why don't you fire this person? It can't be that the President of the United States is a moron. It must be your translator. Wow. That is problematic, although I think people are beginning to catch on. Soraya Caicedo, executive producer of the Spanish language program for SBS Radio, said translating Mr. Trump could be a challenge. He aims to speak not as a president would speak. He speaks as someone in the community would speak, she said. That is an awfully generous way of putting it, too. I wouldn't say that it's difficult in terms of the words, but for people from South America, it can be difficult to interpret his meaning. Balancing clarity while retaining the style of speech can be a struggle, as can be relaying the president's sarcasm and metaphors. When he says Mexicans are rapists, he's talking about crime. But when he says China is raping America, he's talking about economics. Ms. Caicedo said, yeah, well, that's a metaphor you should probably not use, but if you use it, you got to translate it, and that does provide some difficulty. We cannot translate it literally as China is sexually abusing America. I wouldn't either. Other phrases can gain new meaning when interpreted for foreign audiences. Make America great again can sound like make America powerful again in the minds of many Spanish language listeners, said Ms. Caicedo. When he says make America great again, we are thinking of the kind of America that used to intervene in governments in Latin America, she said, noting instances of U.S. intervention in Chile, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. And that will play differently, won't it? Ms. Caicedo said the leak of a video of Trump bragging about being able to do whatever he wanted to women posed a particular challenge. There are some words I wouldn't say in a media context as a journalist, or even in my case as a woman, she said. It was a balancing act between moderating the language but still properly, accurately reporting on what was said. It's an added responsibility for us journalists who have to translate what he has to say, she said. Accurate translations can be vitally important in global politics, especially when it comes to powerful leaders. In 2006, debate broke out over whether the Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, had threatened to, quote, wipe Israel off the map, unquote, or merely predicted that the government would, quote, vanish from the pages of history, unquote. That can be difficult. See also raisins and virgins. Reports that Vladimir Putin labeled Trump intelligent or a genius have been similarly contested. A more accurate translation would have been that, well, never mind what I think. It says here, a more accurate translation would have been that Trump was bright, as in colorful. Wouldn't that be something? Well, I like Putin. Putin says such nice things about you. He said I was a genius. He said you were bright orange. Wouldn't that be amazing? I don't think you're that smart, and I certainly don't now. I was merely pointing out that you're like neon colored, and that's astonishing. Oh my God. Wouldn't that be, that'd be the great basis for probably a buddy movie, if nothing else. Oh wow. He's bright. You mean he's smart? No, I mean he's bright orange. He's literally, that's crazy. Did that happen to you when the prostitutes peed on you? Is that what that is? Oh man. He's corroding. Well, you never know. Language. It's so funny. Well, there you go. That's the end of the article. That was burying the lead on that one. Holy cow. Well, I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. let's go back and see what else we've got in pocket, because there's tons. And here's a switch in directions for you. Well, we'll take a break. We're going to end up, I'm sure, getting back to Trump and everything that's wrong with him, because there's plenty of it. But here's you know what? Should we save that for like a Friday? That's a switch. No, let's throw it out there. I just thought this was astonishing. Retweeted yesterday, and I grabbed it and put it aside. I don't know who, I forget who suggested this one, if anybody, or maybe I just happened to see it fly by. Here's a weird story for you. Every once in a while, spooky technology story will sneak through into our Kagro in the Morning feed, right? This is a release from the Federal Trade Commission, which I didn't know was even allowed to print things anymore under the Trump administration, but this is interesting. What Vizio was doing behind the TV screen. And this is interesting. It's a Federal Trade Commission. Well, maybe it's like a blog entry more than a press release. They do have a business blog. And, and it's all set up like an article. Leslie Fair is the name of the writer. That's what struck me. Ordinarily, if it was just a press release, you wouldn't have that. So it's a blog entry, really. Consumers have bought more than 11 million internet-connected Vizio televisions since 2010. I guess Vizio is the brand name. The television manufacturing has gone a little crazy lately. All right. Well, anyway, we have 11 million of them, I guess, out there. But according to a complaint filed by the FTC and the New Jersey Attorney General, consumers didn't know that while they were watching their TVs, Vizio was watching them. Isn't that weird? I've heard so many smart TV kind of creepy horror stories. Here's one laid out in full. The lawsuit challenges the company's tracking practices and offers insights into how established consumer protection principles apply to smart technology. Starting in 2014, Vizio made TVs that automatically tracked what consumers were watching and transmitted that data back to its own servers. Vizio even retrofitted older models by installing its tracking software remotely. Wow. All of this, the FTC and the Attorney General allege, was done without clearly telling consumers or getting their consent. What did Vizio know about what was going on in the privacy of consumers' homes? On a second-by-second basis, Vizio collected a selection of pixels on the screen that it matched to a database of TV, movie, and commercial content. What's more, Vizio identified viewing data from cable or broadband service providers, set-top boxes, streaming devices, DVD players, and over-the-air broadcasters. Add it all up, and Vizio captured as many as 100 billion data points each day from millions of TVs. I don't know if it really matters how many data points it was, but the fact is that they could tell what you were watching not just by, say, tracking what your cable tuner or satellite tuner or whatever tuner you were using was tuned to, like the old Nielsen boxes, but even if you were watching a DVD at home of a movie you rented or bought or a movie you made yourself, I guess that wouldn't show up in their databases, but whatever. Anyway, if you're playing a DVD on your TV, it would actually grab pixels from the TV, a random sampling of pixels, and match it. What other things in my database have this same pattern of pixels in it? And it would guess that you were watching B movie, looking to see whether Trump's speech inauguration speech had actually been plagiarized from B movie, which didn't turn out to be the case. According to one report. I don't know. Could be fake news. Anyway, so they could tell what you were watching even if you weren't watching something being piped into your home. Vizio then turned that mountain of data into cash by selling consumers' viewing histories to advertisers and others. And let's be clear, we're not talking about summary information about national viewing trends. According to the complaint, Vizio got personal. The company provided consumers' IP addresses to data aggregators who then matched the addresses with an individual consumer or household. Vizio's contracts with third parties prohibited the re-identification of consumers and households by name, but allowed a host of other personal details. For example, sex, age, income, marital status, household size, education, and home ownership. and Vizio permitted these companies to track and target its consumers across devices. That's what Vizio was up to behind the screen. But what was the company telling consumers? Not much, according to the complaint. Vizio put its tracking functionality behind a setting called Smart Interactivity. But the FTC and New Jersey Attorney General say that generic way the company described that feature, for example, they described it as enables program offers and suggestions. That doesn't give consumers the necessary heads up to know that Vizio was tracking their TV's every flicker. Oh, and the Smart Interactivity feature didn't even provide the promised program offers and suggestions. So much the worse. The complaint alleges that Vizio engaged in unfair trade practices that violated the FTC Act and were unconscionable under New Jersey law. The complaint also alleges that Vizio failed to adequately disclose the nature of its Smart Interactivity feature and misled consumers with its generic name and description. To settle the case, Vizio has agreed to stop unauthorized tracking, to prominently disclose its TV viewing collection practices, and to get consumers express consent before collecting and sharing viewing information. In addition, the company must delete most of the data it collected and put a privacy program in place that evaluates Vizio's practices and its partners. The order also includes a $1.5 million payment to the FTC and an additional civil penalty to New Jersey for a total of $2.2 million. Very interesting. And then they offer up some tips that here are tips smart companies take from the latest law enforcement action involving smart products. Also discussed at FTC's recent Smart TV workshop. I don't think any of you are manufacturers of smart products, but if you are, you're invited to review their tips for you. I thought that was just an interesting, totally out of the blue, but amazing what we forget that smart technology might be able to get away with if we're not careful. And probably another good reason why, as Parleo says, humans should count our votes over here. Who knows what's going on out there? All right. Let's see. Ricky correcting my French. I guess the French translator's name in the last article would be pronounced vino, like Italian for wine. So we can deal with that one. Sorry about mangling the French. If we, raised our kids right in this country, I'd speak Spanish and French, but I don't. I can read Spanish, though. I'm pretty good at that. All right. And I can read it aloud. Speaking of reading aloud, I guess there's another avenue we need to explore. Apparently, there's lots of speculation out there about Donald Trump's reading ability. And it's rather startling. And I guess he's not got much in the way of confidence in his ability to read aloud live. And apparently that has led to a lot of his departing from teleprompter scripts, among other things. And there was the David Pakman show. I was thinking, I saw, somebody sent me a clip of his show. I mean, I've seen it before, but this particular clip was analyzing the question of, can Donald Trump read, at least read aloud? We know he's not reading reports and things that would be, important for an informed president to do, but instead prefers television. But ultimately, the conclusion led up to playing some video of him at a deposition in one of the many lawsuits that have been filed against him over the years, and being asked by the opposing counsel to look at a document and read some particular relevant portion aloud and discuss what it meant to him. And he's doing everything he can, and his lawyer is doing everything that he can to object and to prevent him from even trying. And in fact, he never goes ahead and does it. He just he looks at things over and then sort of offers up something of a summary. So it's not that he's illiterate and can't read, but that he just, for whatever reason, he can't read aloud. It was very weird. But that's pretty limiting if you're not much of a reader and don't do well with reading comprehension. You shouldn't be president, really, if that's the case. All right, well, let's see. Just by way of clearing things up, let's see. One, Ricky says she doesn't speak French. She just knows a lot of French people. And I don't, so that's a problem. But I did know a lot of Italian people growing up, so I can deal with some of the Italian. And Justice reminding me, for what it's worth, we very often, there at Netroots Radio, have David Pakman's show leading up to our show. I guess on Tuesdays through Friday when we don't have Hopping Mad to lead into the show. It's David Pakman. So many of you are likely familiar with the show, and if you're not, well, then I suggest that you tune in earlier and see more and listen to more of the Netroots Radio programming day. Louise Mensch is on a tear here all of a sudden. I'm set to see what she's doing. She's tweeting around a screenshot of a Michael Cohen tweet, the Michael Cohen, who is Donald Trump's lawyer. And it's all marked up with red and circles and arrows, and I'm wondering what she's going crazy about now. Let me see if I can open this thing up someplace where we can tuck it away and I can show it to you if necessary. Let's see. So what's going on here? What's the exchange? Louise Mensch tweets to Cohen. What is this? You know when you told us all to look at your daughter's Instagram? Oh, remember when he was denying I'd ever been in Prague? She's still on that. You know when you told us all to look at your daughter's Instagram? We did. Where were you August 19th through 22nd? And what is this? Is this supposed to be his daughter's Instagram? And Michael Cohen, anyway, answers her. In Los Angeles, verified by the press. This picture was taken in January 2017. Okay, that was a picture from his daughter's Instagram, flying somewhere. She's taking a picture out the airplane window of the wing of her plane. Louise Mensch then says, so she's asking him, where were you August 19th through 22nd? And he says Los Angeles. And then she says, Elizabeth, New Jersey. Maybe alt Los Angeles, but isn't actually Los Angeles. It's Newark. I drew you a picture, helpful, and hashtag helpful, hashtag caring, and she embeds his tweet saying something, blah, 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 but then circling the date stamp here and says 24th August 2016 from Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I don't know what she thinks she's proving to him. Didn't she just say, where were you August 19th through 22nd? He says Los Angeles, and then she says, oh, no, you don't. On the 24th, which is after the 22nd, you were in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I really don't know where this is going. She's a loon. I mean, and then people are pointing it out. Yeah, that says the 24th, not the 20. I have no idea. She's bonkers. All right. Well, anyway, I just thought I'd point that out to you. She's very anti-Trump, and so it's occasionally tempting to go with the lunacy she's outlining. And sometimes she points to things that make some sense, but every once in a while, I mean, she's just way off base. All right. Well, anyway, that didn't add anything to it. But whenever I see, a possible lunatic sending pictures to Michael Cohen with circles and arrows, I guess I just, on the off chance that they are actually interesting and coherent charges, I thought I'd look in on them. They're not. All right. Let's see what else. To get back to Donald Trump and clear out my queue of Brian Monroe suggestions, there's another piece from the CBC, back up to Canada. It's an all-Canada show today. Why Trump supporters say the U.S. president is doing a phenomenal job. And I just spent a little bit of time yesterday watching yet another one of these. Let's reach out and understand Trump voters and what they're all about. One of the CNN pieces, they traveled down to Kentucky. Kentucky seems to be the hot spot for looking in on why people love Donald Trump. And it may have something to do with, I think, the number of people who signed up for the Connect program thinking they were getting something other than Obamacare and now don't want it taken away, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if that makes it ground zero or not, but let's see where they explore here. It's not all Kentucky, but, the CNN piece was. It was also very interesting. Let's take a look at this one. In the blue-collar town of Bladesdell, New York, Woodlawn Deli owner Mike Schaefer stepped away from the cash register for a few minutes to explain why he believes Donald Trump is doing a great job as U.S. president. And mind you, this is datelined February 3rd. He hasn't had an opportunity to do a great job at anything yet, and he's fouled up most of what he's touched. But it's always interesting to look inside the minds of these folks, if for no other reason than to conclude that it was a waste of time. Why are the Canadians doing it? Well, Ricky knows the answer, because Canada is awesome. All right. Well, they're looking at the United States in ways I was going to say that our journalists aren't, but they are. And we can't get them to stop. So why look at it from a Canadian perspective? I don't know. Because Brian asked me to. And we like to do things that listeners suggest here. Indeed, Schaefer went one step further. Not only has Trump excelled as commander-in-chief, during his brief time in office, but he's accomplished more than Barack Obama did in 8 years. By the way, that was exactly the same sentiment expressed in the CNN piece that I looked at last night. And I guess now I'll have to give myself a note that I should include that for you all to review. There was a woman from one of the women they interviewed in Kentucky who said the same thing. Why, he's been great. He's done more in 2 days, whatever the time has been, than Barack Obama did in 8 years, which is, of course, ludicrous, but I don't know. They believe it, so it's, I guess, somewhat important to put that out there. He's stuck to everything he said he's going to do so far, except put Hillary Clinton in jail. That's the only thing he hasn't done. He also hasn't repealed Obamacare or replaced it with anything. He hasn't destroyed ISIS. He hasn't asked the generals to give him a plan within 30 days. He hasn't built his wall. He isn't going to make Mexico pay for it. I mean, there's a million things, but they don't register with these guys. To be sure, Trump has had a busy 2 weeks since assuming the presidency, taking executive actions on many fronts. He pulled the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. He didn't. We weren't in it yet. Began the process of rolling back the Affordable Care Act. He didn't. And moved forward with the Keystone XL pipeline project. Again, he hasn't. He said he wanted those things, and he wants the government to do whatever it can to make those things happen, but there isn't that much they can do at this point. He also signed an executive order to begin planning the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border to keep out illegal immigrants, and he barred Syrian refugees from coming into the U.S. indefinitely and imposed a 120-day ban on all refugees and a 90-day ban on visitors coming from 7 Muslim-majority countries. And that's, of course, been stayed by the judges, but they didn't know that yet. He also dismissed the country's acting attorney general, who refused to enforce the travel ban, and nominated conservative Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. That's okay, personnel moves. More than Barack Obama did in 8 years? I don't know. At least he's trying to do stuff right away, not just sit back, said Ray Sanford, a truck driver who made a quick stop at the deli to pick up a sandwich. I think he's doing a good job. He's got the ambition to go and do stuff. While some of Trump's moves have sparked outrage and demonstrations across the country, many of his supporters seem very pleased. Pro-Trump sentiment was certainly shared among many of the customers who trickled in for lunch at the small Woodlawn Deli, an establishment that is half restaurant, half grocery store. It's located on the west side of a major road that cuts deep through this Rust Belt area, which is home to a Republic steel plant. I mean, this is it's interesting. I mean, it's very explanatory. That's nice. It seems to be written as though Canada has never experienced anything like a convenience store with a sandwich counter, but I have a feeling you do have such things. Although, who knows, maybe it's illegal in Canada to combine the two. I don't know. Pro-Trump sentiment was certainly shared among, oh yes, we did this one. Bladsdell is about 13 kilometers south of Buffalo, and both the town and the city are part of Erie County, which went for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Still, Trump won 44.4% of the vote, the highest percentage for a Republican candidate since Ronald Reagan in this according to PolitiFact. But those kinds of statistics don't interest Schaefer, who said he doesn't really follow politics. Except this year he decided to vote for president for the first time since Ross Perot ran for office in 1992, which tells you a little bit, again, about where their heads are. I'm just sick of it, Schaefer said. Sick of the same old bull crap. Same people getting in, promising you this, promising you that, and doing absolutely nothing. Trump was and is different, he said. Someone who would tell it like it is, and so far is doing just what he said he was going to do, except for building the wall, repealing Obamacare, putting Hillary Clinton in jail, yada, yada, yada. That includes Trump's controversial executive order to impose a temporary ban on refugees. So what else? What comes up next? Do you lock your door at night? I lock my door at night. We don't just want anybody walking in, said Dave Thompson, sitting at one of the deli's tables eating a wrap. They should be properly vetted. They haven't been properly vetted. They, of course, have been properly vetted. That's why there hasn't been an attack in the United States by any refugees ever. But whatever, he heard they weren't properly vetted, so he's saying it. Plus, he's got a rap. So what are you going to do, argue? Thompson, who engraves industrial steel rolls, and how could you argue with a guy who engraves industrial steel rolls, said Trump is doing an excellent job and praised him for his executive orders, including the one that begins the process of rolling back Obamacare, though it really doesn't do anything. He also loved every minute of Trump's inaugural speech. Naturally, it was the worst in history, which was hammered by critics who characterized the address as a dark, confrontational, campaign-style polemic. I thought it was beautiful. That's because you thought all of the stupid stump speeches were beautiful, and you heard the same thing, but you don't realize that or don't care, and probably have never watched another inaugural speech anyway, but okay. It was very positive. Impossible to say. He's going to take on crime. He's going to take on all this stuff in this country that everybody's ignored. But not everyone at Woodland Deli was enamored with Trump's first 2 weeks. Horrible, said John Yeager when asked to describe Trump's presidency thus far. Just across the board, just everything he's doing, everything on the news that's been negative about him, he said. I've never had a president of our country where I've seen other countries protesting him. True. Well, not to this extent, and not all participating in the women's march in solidarity. There's been certainly other countries protesting our presidents all the time, but not in coordination with millions of people inside the United States, usually. Unless it's opposition to an international invasion, in which case you do see that. Anyway, next up, in nearby North Tonawanda, part of Niagara County, which did go for Trump, Sue Fassel, I'm guessing, F-A-S-S-L, interesting spelling, dismissed those demonstrating across the U.S. against the president. Most of them are nothing but a bunch of whining millennials, a product of a system that has sugar-coated everything all their lives, said Fassel, owner of Designer Sportswear. Designer Sportswear. And here's a picture of her. And let me tell you, there's no Designer Sportswear on Sue Fassel in this picture. Fassel says she loves Trump and that he's been doing phenomenal. Oh, I skipped a small portion of this here. They don't have any idea of the real world, she said. They feel like they're entitled to everything, but they don't have to work for anything. Half of them don't have to balance a checkbook, which is spelled Canadian style with a Q. Not what Fassel said. She said E-C-K. Anyway, he got in there and started working right away. He didn't sit back. He didn't go on vacation. He didn't go to Hawaii. That's right. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He didn't go on the golf course. He's been twice. He's working over at the National Bowling Store. That's the name of the store. Honestly, if I was kidding, I would make that the name of the store. The National Bowling Store. Larry Oken, O-K-A-N, sat waiting to purchase a new bowling ball. As we all occasionally, when you got to buy a bowling ball, you got to buy a bowling ball. You wait in line for that bowling ball. He's waiting. He said he wasn't surprised by reports the president may have had less than diplomatic discussions over the phone with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. He likes to fight. It's a good quality. He's a negotiator. I'm a salesman, and I like to negotiate too. It just goes hand in hand. How much for the bowling ball? $100. Okay. Real negotiator, he probably. Steve Hawking, though, who's kind of neutral on Trump, said it's too soon to judge the new president, and he'd rather reevaluate him after his first 100 days. Who knows? He might get us into a big mess, he said, or the skies will get clear. Well, that seems like a reasoned approach to all of that. A rather amazing cross-section, I guess, if you will. It's a little bit weird, a little bit revealing, but I encourage you all to take a look also at the CNN piece, which I hope I can find a link to for Scott to include in the roundup as well. Well, let's see. Moving on. I thought that was an interesting perspective. Let's see. Another good look behind the scenes. This one also trending online and also from the Washington Post, which I'm happy to tell you I can read all year long thanks to the subscription. I finally signed up. I know Oliver Willis was mad at us all for signing up and giving money over to the Washington Post and only to have them turn around and hire Hugh Hewitt with it, and that is disturbing, but just like taxes, you can't control everything they do with the dollars. Inside the White House cabinet battle over Trump's immigration order. I thought this was revealing and gave me a little bit of hope, and maybe a little bit of hope to people who, were willing to consider the merits of a possible vote in the Senate, maybe from their Democratic senators, in favor of the nominations of people like generals, former generals, Mattis and Kelly. So, what is this? This is a Josh Rogan piece, Inside the White House Cabinet Battle Over Trump's Immigration Order. Editor's note, just up at the top here. Prior to publication of this column, the Post sought comment from the Department of Homeland Security, but not from the White House. We should have done both. The article has been updated, noted by Fred Hyatt. Here's the first update being added up at the top, and there are 2 of them. Although, one of the updates is this post has been updated. I know. Oh my goodness. They got to think about that policy. Okay. This one clearly marked update February 4th, 6:13 p.m. I guess the original publication of this was also February 4th, but it doesn't tell you what time. Update at 6:13 p.m. The article has been updated to reflect comments from the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. The article previously stated that Stephen K. Bannon, or as Scott calls him, Stephen K.G. Bannon, KGB, visited Homeland Security Secretary John F. Kelly's office on January 28th. Spicer said Bannon did not make such a visit. He also said that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Bannon did not participate in a 2 a.m. conference call on January 29th. The article also previously stated that President Trump approved a pause in executive orders pending new procedures. According to Spicer, it was White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, rather than the president, who approved the new procedures, but not a pause. The second update on February 5th at 8:55 a.m., this is it. Literally, it says, this post has been updated. How about a pause to figure out that procedure? All right, on to the body of the article. Over the weekend of January 28th and 29th, as airport protests raged over President Trump's executive order on immigration, the man charged with implementing the order, Homeland Security Secretary John F. Kelly, had a plan. He would issue a waiver for lawful permanent residents, aka green card holders, from the 7 majority Muslim countries whose citizens had been banned from entering the United States. White House Chief Strategist Stephen K. Bannon wanted to stop Kelly in his tracks and told him not to issue the order. Again, who the hell is he to say that? Nobody knows. He's an advisor to the president, and everybody knows he's supposed to be an important guy. But even the president doesn't say he speaks for him. So, he told him not to issue the order. Kelly, according to 2 administration officials familiar with the confrontation, refused to comply. Good. That was the beginning of a weekend of negotiations among senior Trump administration staffers that led on Sunday, January 29th, to a White House decision to change the process for the issuance of executive orders. The disagreement between Bannon and Kelly pitted a political operator against a military disciplinarian. 2 administration officials gave the following account of their exchange. Respectfully but firmly, the retired general told Bannon that despite his high position in the White House and close relationship with President Trump, the former Breitbart chief was not in Kelly's chain of command. He's right. If the president wanted Kelly to back off from issuing the waiver, Kelly would have to hear it from the president directly, he told Bannon. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said Kelly and Bannon spoke on January 27th and 29th, but denied they had a confrontation over the green card waiver. In an email sent late Saturday, Bannon also denied a confrontation with Kelly and said he had not told him to withhold the waiver. In other words, he lost and then changed his story. Oh, I lost, and then I don't want to look like he told me to get lost, and if the president really wanted this waiver revoked, then he could very well pick up the phone and just say so, but he wouldn't. And so rather than look like he had been undermined and defeated, Bannon now says, I never told him anything about that. We didn't have a confrontation. We didn't have any confrontation. Nothing. No. Yeah, I don't know. I think I believe the prior version. Trump didn't call Kelly to tell him to hold off. Kelly issued the waiver late Saturday night, although it wasn't officially announced until the following day. That did not end the dispute, by the way. At approximately 2 a.m. Sunday, according to the two officials, a conference call of several top officials was convened to discuss the ongoing confusion over the executive order and the anger from cabinet officials over their lack of inclusion in the process in advance. On the call were Senior White House Policy Advisor Stephen Miller, White House Counsel Donald McGahn, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, Kelly, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, and a senior State Department official who represented the State Department because Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson hadn't yet been confirmed. One White House official and one administration official told me that the cabinet officials presented a united front and complained about the process that led to the issuance of the immigration executive order, focusing on their near-complete lack of consultation, as well as the White House's reluctance to make what they saw as common-sense revisions, such as exempting green card holders. Bannon and Miller pushed back, defending the White House's actions and explaining that the process and substance of the order had been kept to a close circle because the Trump administration had not yet installed its own officials in key government roles, and other officials were still waiting to get settled into place. Flynn, according to the White House official, partially sided with the cabinet officials, arguing that they should have been included in the process, even if the White House ultimately decided not to adopt their recommendations. Flynn's argument was a process argument, that they were unnecessarily putting these guys in a tough position, the White House official said. If you are going to ignore them, you have to at least give them a chance to say their piece. Later on Sunday, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus met with senior staff and made a decision that following the already scheduled rollout of an executive order on regulatory reforms, all other executive orders would be held up until a process was established that included the input of key officials outside the White House. Spicer told the Post there was no pause and that Priebus simply issued new procedures for executive orders that were meant for improving the process. We have to evaluate the way we get input from the cabinet secretaries affected before we do things, the White House official said. The pause appeared to end on Friday when Trump signed an executive order and a memorandum on financial regulation. The weekend's events were the first major dust-up between the White House political leadership and the powerful figures Trump has appointed to head the national security bureaucracies. The cabinet members stood up for themselves and their agencies and successfully pushed for a policy tweak that the administration later embraced in a memorandum to, quote, clarify the executive order. The cabinet members also demonstrated that they had something to offer the White House besides their policy input. They are the most credible spokespeople for controversial White House policies in the eyes of the public. On Tuesday, Kelly gave the White House badly needed political cover by holding a news conference and strongly defending the immigration executive order. This is not, I repeat, not a ban on Muslims, Kelly said. Well, okay, that's what he said anyway. We cannot gamble with American lives. I will not gamble with American lives. These orders are a matter of national security, and it's my sworn responsibility as Secretary of Homeland Security to protect and defend the American people, he said. He said the DHS would implement the order humanely, that the DHS lawyers had been involved in preparing the order, and that he did have some advance notice, denying reports that he found out about it being signed while he was on an airplane. We knew it was coming. It wasn't a surprise, Kelly said. Minutes later, Spicer told reporters at the Daily Briefing that, quote, there was proper coordination and preparation, unquote, between the White House and the DHS. If the White House is now serious about working with the cabinet, that's a positive sign and means that this series of events had a constructive impact on policymaking. But there's a good chance that this won't be the last time the cabinet secretaries will have to confront Bannon and Miller, score their first battle as a tie. Interesting insight, I thought, and good for you, Secretary Kelly, for making a process argument, which I always appreciate, and two, finding a way to get Bannon out of your face. Listen, if you think you speak for the president, that's cool and all, then it should be no problem whatsoever to get the president on the phone to tell me so himself. And I'm not just a nobody asking for that either. I'm Secretary of Homeland Security. It's not a ludicrous request. And lo and behold, Bannon could not produce. And so the policy changed. An important insight, I think, into the way things are going to operate. And it won't work for every cabinet secretary, but maybe only for the former generals. That's the kind of guy Trump probably is at heart. But I don't know. I think we ought to take note of that and see if there's any way we can use that to our advantage. Okay. Other things to toss into the mix here. A Politico piece on the Senate, which they say is coming apart. We might as well catch up on what they have to say about that and why they say such things as the Senate begins to wind down its 30 hours on the DeVos nomination sometime around lunchtime for our Eastern Coast listeners. We expect the vote on DeVos, and it may in fact end up being a tie unless they can convince one more Republican to live up to being deeply concerned, like Susan Collins is, along with Lisa Murkowski, and vote no. And I mean, it would be an important moment, but, the Secretary of Education, quite honestly, I mean, it's important to get a good person in there, so who knows what they're doing. That's true. But as cabinet officials that might be defeated in nomination votes go, it's a defeat you could probably absorb better than most others. So I recommend it to you, President Trump. All right. The Senate, though, is coming apart. Who says so? Well, the person who wrote the headline that accompanies this piece by John Bresnahan and Burgess Everett in Politico. Subheader, things have gotten so bad in the chamber lately that Chuck Schumer even voted against Mitch McConnell's wife. That would, of course, be Elaine Chao, now Secretary of Transportation. The Senate, they say, is barely functioning. I think it's working great, but only because it is barely functioning. That's true. And the future looks even bleaker. Showdowns, government shutdown threats, and nuclear options will loom over the chamber in the coming months. In fact, the tumultuous first month of President Donald Trump's administration may turn out to be the most pleasant period in the 115th Congress. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Total Republican control of Washington should mean that Trump gets everything he wants out of Capitol Hill. But Senate Democrats, the last line of Democratic defense, are slow-walking the installation of Trump's cabinet to a historic degree. You're welcome. So much so that Republicans haven't even started yet on Trump's legislative agenda. You're welcome, and entirely the point. Republicans will eventually win all these confirmation battles, but it will be time-consuming and ugly. How ugly has it gotten? Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer voted against the nomination of Elaine Chao for Secretary of Transportation. Chao happens to be the wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. And ordinarily, in other administrations anyway, you might expect some closer comity between the majority and minority leaders in particular. Chao was approved easily. The vote was 93-6, but Schumer's no vote infuriated many Republicans. Yet it was also the embattled Schumer's way of sending a message to both his base and GOP counterparts. I will do whatever it takes. He joined the likes of Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker in voting against Chao. The Senate is coming apart, said Senator Bill Nelson, Democrat of Florida. Let me grab this Mediaite piece that I have just seen Bill retweet. That'll help me fill out my list of links I need to send over to Scott. Thanks, Bill, inadvertently helping out. Oh, maybe it was consciously done. Oh, Law News. We're back at Law News. I remember them. Okay. The Senate, though, is coming apart. That's what Bill Nelson said. It's not a good time. It's not a good time, added Senator John McCain. Democrats, many of whom openly loathe Trump, yes, I would say so, openly loathe Trump, And the Dems are furious over his refugee crackdown, which Democrats describe as a Muslim ban, because it is one, and other executive actions have used all the procedural arrows in their quiver. Not yet. To slow down confirmation of Trump's cabinet nominees. They've boycotted committee meetings, refused to let panels meet in the afternoon, dragged out votes as long as possible, and refused to agree to even normal floor requests. They are voting against Trump's cabinet picks in unprecedented numbers, arguing that Trump doesn't deserve even a patina of partisan support. And their tactics have been partly successful. The Senate's confirmation of Trump's cabinet is the slowest in modern history, spanning back to President Dwight Eisenhower. Presidents Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan had their whole cabinets confirmed at this point. Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama were nearly finished, and even George H.W. Bush had 9 of his cabinet secretaries in place despite opposition from a Democratic Senate. Trump, though, has only 4 cabinet secretaries confirmed, although several more, including Attorney General nominee Jeff Sessions, are expected to clear this week. Democrats say it's Trump's own fault for the slow pace. Democrats claim if Trump had picked better qualified candidates for these posts, the slowdown wouldn't have happened. They are extraordinarily fringe cabinet nominees driving this conversation, insisted liberal Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, a central advocate of slowing Trump's agenda. And recipient of one of my memos at that. McConnell has responded to, although I should say Jeff Merkley knew exactly how to do this even without my memo. He's a parliamentarian himself. McConnell has responded to the delay tactics by exploiting his majority status to grind down the Democrats. He scheduled a rare 6:30 a.m. Senate vote on Friday to move forward Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education. He has delayed the opening times for the Senate each day to evade Schumer's objections. When Democrats refused to attend committee hearings to vote on nominees, Republicans changed the committee rules so they could jam them through. They moved forward on nominations even before background checks were complete, or refused Democratic demands for more information. Republicans insist Democrats will eventually get tired of gnashing their teeth over Trump. He's the president and there's nothing they can do about it. It's a message you hear over and over from Republicans. Trump won. Let it go. I don't see how they sustain their anger and their lack of participation in the governing process very long and still come back in 2018. I just don't think it's an agenda for success, said Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn of Texas, concern trolling. So my hope is that once they sort of get over the fact that Donald Trump won, they'll try to be more productive. GOP senators add that Democrats made their own troubles on Trump's nominees by invoking the nuclear option on executive branch nominees and lower court judges in 2013, making it possible to push them through on a simple majority vote. Before that, it took 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, forcing presidents and the majority to cut deals with the minority party. The prospect of another nuclear option fight looms over Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch, a move that would cause a volcanic uproar from the minority party. Yet Democrats won't rule out blocking him, and Republicans are threatening to kill their supermajority requirement to get him confirmed, potentially watering down the filibuster even further. However, the real payback from Democrats may come later in the year. The first half of 2017 will be dominated by bills that McConnell can push through on a simple majority, including Obamacare repeal and a tax reform package. That would be through the use of reconciliation bills, of course. But government funding will run out on April 28th, and Democrats could filibuster any bill to keep the government open, forcing a showdown over Republicans' spending and policy decisions. It's unlikely to happen, admitted Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois, although Democrats suggest it could. The summer will see a vote on increasing the nation's $20 trillion plus debt ceiling. Republicans can push an increase through the House on their own, but they need 60 votes in the Senate. Democrats could get leverage there. It is the annual appropriations bills, though, where Democrats have their most power. Republican congressional leaders in the White House already believe Senate Democrats will block most or all of those bills, looking to gain an upper hand over Trump and the Republicans. If Trump goes too far with policy riders, totally defunding Planned Parenthood, for instance, or makes cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency or other health and safety programs that Democrats consider too deep, Democrats suggest they're willing to go to the mat. I don't know. Depends on what they propose, replied Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan when asked about funding brinkmanship. They do it correctly. We're not going to just shut down the government just to shut down the government. That's not what this is about. A number of senators, including those in his own party, said Trump is going to have to dramatically tone down his rhetoric and attempt to build some relationships with Democrats. I hope and believe that sooner rather than later, the president will realize that he has to establish some bipartisan relationships, McCain said. McCain added that the first 2 weeks of the Trump presidency have felt like 2 months, and some longtime legislators had to dredge up dire events to make today's political battles seem normal. People ask me if I'm worried about our country right now, and I say, well, I am. But I always try to put things in perspective, said Senator Tom Carper, Democrat of Delaware. This is a country that survived a civil war, followed by the assassination of our president, followed by the impeachment of the next president. We got through that, so the Senate will get through this. Doesn't tell us a great deal exactly about what their tactics are, but it's a good note and well worth collecting some of the factoids in there about it being historically slow and largely working as designed on the part of the Democrats in the Senate. So they're kind of listening, and they've got a good parliamentarian tactician in Jeff Merkley, who, by the way, had an interesting op-ed in the New York Times, also, I think, from the weekend, which I'll give you the idea from the title. Don't let Republicans steal the seat. Speaking, of course, of the seat that should have gone to Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, but outlining a pretty good explainer for why he takes a maximalist position on this stuff. And, somebody has decided to give us a call. Isn't that right? That's great. Well, how about we just tell you to shut up and go away for now? Why has this even got any volume? I have no idea. But and I don't know who's calling us either. So, okay, well, leave us a message, will you? Thanks very much. Getting back, and of course, this is going to ring on the iPad as well. It's an interesting thing that they have going on, linking those two over at Apple. Okay, here's another bit of news I wanted to toss in there. This from, I don't know what this publication is, Rewire News, but it looked like an interesting piece, and I forget who tossed this one to us, but it probably came through the KITM hashtag. And let's take a look at this one. This is an interesting bit here, just in terms of weirdness of relationships. Border Patrol Union pushed for Muslim ban. That probably doesn't surprise you. From Breitbart News Studios. I'd like to renew my objection to this whole thing. I've not yet gotten an idea from anybody. I haven't seen any reporting on it. I search around every once in a while. Does Steve Bannon, while serving on the National Security Council, much to the chagrin apparently of the president who signed the order, and of course as chief White House strategy advisor, et cetera, is he still cohabiting with the Breitbart News offices? In other words, was the Border Patrol Union pushing for the Muslim ban from the Breitbart News Studios, meaning his house? I mean, isn't that a little bit odd? And don't we have any weird feelings about the fact that he's living, I think, possibly rent-free in a house owned by an Egyptian politician, and he's on the National Security Council? That doesn't raise any flags at all, I guess, huh? Maybe he moved out. I don't know. Anyway, an official from a union representing U.S. Border Patrol agents, suggested the union, which backed President Trump's 2016 campaign, should be credited with the president's executive orders banning travelers from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Interesting that they would think that they'd have anything to do with it, and also concerning, and also, I guess, a good explanation for why Border Patrol agents seem to be enforcing the ban with such exceptional cruelty, despite getting, in many cases, instructions from the White House or other branches, other departments to back off a little bit, and then explicitly being ordered to do so by the courts, but refusing to do so. What is this all about? Months before President Trump issued sweeping anti-immigration executive orders, he told U.S. Border Patrol employees that their union would play a critical role in cracking down on asylum seekers and refugees seeking to enter the United States. Remember this? In July, Trump appeared on the Green Line, that would be the National Border Patrol Council's podcast, promising Border Patrol agents they would be, quote, given the tools, unquote, to patrol the border as they saw fit. The weekly podcast is recorded at several Breitbart News studios, which is owned by the white nationalist site Breitbart. I don't know where it is exactly, but interesting. Maybe in the basement of the house. Trump has avid backers in the unions behind Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Border Patrol that combined represent 21,000 immigration officers. Sean Moran, Vice President of Media Relations for the Border Patrol Union, representing 18,000 agents and support personnel in the U.S. Border Patrol, suggested in a recent Green Line episode that the NBPC should be credited with the president's executive orders banning travelers from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. This is not the result of anybody in the chain of command at the Reagan building doing anything. Don't even think for a second this has anything to do with the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection or the Chief of the Border Patrol, because it's not. It's weird construction, but that's what he says. Said Moran, who in the podcast often conflates immigration with terrorism and charges that, quote, illegals are responsible for a number of social ills. It's because of the hard work of Border Patrol agents nationwide. We found somebody that was willing to listen. We supported him. He got elected, and now he is following through on what some people thought were just hyperbolic campaign promises. Like Trump, Moran often characterizes undocumented immigrants as criminals and murderers, often citing the case of Catherine Steinle, who was shot and killed in San Francisco in 2015. An undocumented immigrant is charged with the murder in Steinle's death and is awaiting trial. He, by the way, says the gun went off by accident. It was a gun fail incident, he claims. Trump, during the 2016 campaign, repeatedly referenced that story, relying on unsupported and anecdotal evidence about the number of murders carried out by undocumented immigrants to justify draconian immigration laws. And remember, by the way, as an aside, part of his executive order was he wants a list compiled of all the crimes committed by illegal immigrants and refugees in this country every week. Witness, though, what they did when they were finally asked for a list of the kind of terrorist incidents that happened that were or underreported, and they gave us this list of garbage. What do you think the list of crimes committed by undocumented immigrants is going to be? First of all, who compiles that? And we haven't adjudicated any of those crimes either. He'll want them in real time as they happen. And we're not really sure that crimes have actually been committed just yet. Certainly no one's been convicted of them. What's the point of a national list of things we're charging immigrants with? Well, we know what the point is. Anyway, according to studies conducted by the American Immigration Council and others, immigrants are less likely to commit serious crimes or be behind bars than the native-born, and high rates of immigration are associated with lower rates of violent crime and property crime. This holds true for both legal immigrants and the unauthorized, regardless of their country of origin or levels of education. In other words, the overwhelming majority of immigrants are not criminals by any commonly accepted definition of the term. But so what, right? Trump is one of many anti-immigrant leaders to appear on the Border Patrol Union's Green Line podcast. Others include former Maricopa County, Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio, known for terrorizing undocumented immigrants, and Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies at the anti-immigrant group Center for Immigration Studies, whose research was used as a reference on Trump's campaign website for his formal immigration policies. Moran said, "Thank God for Brandon Darby. Thank God for Breitbart News." Who's Darby? He's a former FBI informant and the managing director of Breitbart. He is responsible for articles such as Border Patrol Union, Feds risking agents' lives to appease fringe groups. A reference to Border Patrol agents having their vehicles affixed with cameras after allegations of abuse and corruption. Darby has featured Moran in his work and has quoted him extensively. Usually, Moran is openly critical of Border Patrol officials, accusing the Federal Immigration Agency of backing down to special interest groups such as human rights organizations fighting on behalf of migrants abused by the Border Patrol agents. He has accused the politically appointed class within the U.S. Border Patrol and in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency of cooking the books to make it appear as if illegal immigration is decreasing. Moran operates as if the NBPC is in opposition to the Border Patrol in the Green Line podcast and in Breitbart articles in which he has been featured. Moran said in a recent Green Line podcast that he considered the agency to be part of the Obama administration. Moran has made claims that the agency doesn't allow Border Patrol agents to do the job they signed up for, something echoed by Art Del Cueto, president of Tucson Local 2544 and the vice president at large of the NBPC, who told Rewire in a phone interview that Trump's executive orders allow Border Patrol agents to, quote, do the job we signed on for. The assertion that the Border Patrol agents weren't allowed to do their jobs under President Obama has been a popular Trump talking point. Cueto cited catch and release, he calls it, as a big problem, something Trump has said, and a topic he addressed in his Border Security and Immigration Enforcement Improvements executive order. The narrative pushed by Trump on the campaign trail was that catch and release was an immigration practice under Obama in which undocumented immigrants who came into contact with law enforcement, no matter the reason, were released rather than being detained and deported. There is no official immigration policy known as catch and release. Rather, it is the temporarily detaining of undocumented immigrants, that's what it says, and then releasing them pending immigration hearings. NBPC officials have found a champion in Trump, whose chief White House strategist, Stephen Bannon, used to lead Breitbart and who reportedly authored Trump's anti-immigration executive orders. In NBPC, Trump has found a powerful ally willing to do his bidding. As Reveal's Andrew Becker reported, long a lobbying force when bargaining with leadership, representing agents under scrutiny or acting as a ground truth squad on Capitol Hill, the union last year backed Trump's bid for the White House. Trump, in turn, has given the union favored status. It appears as if steps were taken to please the union as soon as Trump took office. Former Border Patrol Chief Mark Morgan was asked to step down. Morgan was considered an outsider by NBPC as he was the first chief in the agency's 93-year history who had never worked as a Border Patrol agent. The former chief even came under fire from the executive board of NBPC, who called him a disgrace to the Border Patrol in a November op-ed published by Breitbart. NBPC board members wrote that Morgan was worried because he knows that his comments attacking President-elect Trump's border security policies prior to the election has him in hot water, and that as a hand-picked Obama administration official, he does not have the will necessary to secure the border for the citizens and the legal residents of this country. Strange and stilted language, but that's Breitbart for you. High-ranking members of the NBPC were present at the press conference in which Trump discussed his controversial executive orders. The president even acknowledged the union members. And soon after, there was a joint press release from NBPC and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Union reporting that morale among agents and officers, quote, had increased exponentially since the signing of the orders. If we had been allowed to do our job, some of those illegal aliens would not have been in this country and they would not have gone on to crime sprees or committed their crimes or thought about crimes or maybe obeyed the law or whatever. And those Americans would be alive. Moran said on the Green Line, Obama, I believe, has blood on his hands, along with former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, because of all those families who lost their loved ones. Again, evidence suggests that undocumented immigrants are less likely than the general population to be engaged in violent crime. Trump has launched a political house-cleaning campaign, removing officials unwilling to defend his anti-immigration orders, and now has an anti-immigrant hate group leader in a key position overseeing the Border Patrol. Bannon, the figurehead of a rebranded white supremacist movement, has an increasing level of control over White House and the presidency. Officers representing NBPC, which never had endorsed a presidential candidate before its endorsement of Trump, are thrilled by the president's anti-immigration executive orders and his enforcement-first approach to immigration. This approach hasn't worked since it was first implemented more than 3 decades ago, and it fails to address the reasons why people migrate. If you are not pro-enforcement, though, Moran said on the Green Line, it might be time to start looking for a transfer to a different agency. All, I'm sure, legitimately held views. I don't know whether you should necessarily be psychologically cleared to be a Border Patrol agent if you hold views like that, but hey, weirder still, though, is that they do their podcast from the Breitbart offices, and the Breitbart offices are in the basement of the house where Bannon lives, and Bannon's on the National Security Council and the chief advisor to the president, and all of this happens inside his house, and you wonder how fake news gets such an easy entree into the news cycle. Gee whiz. It happened a lot easier than we thought it might, even when we thought that Laura Ingraham might somehow end up in the communications department over at the White House, even though she's responsible for and owns her own fake news outlet. Well, there's more and more and more, but we did clear out an awful lot of our pending stories. There's still more, and we'll use the rest of the week to try and sort some of those out. And, wow, there's still a tremendous amount out there. All right, well, very interesting. And time now to start contemplating the handover of the Netroots Radio airwaves, such as they are, to the guys on the after show. And we'll get to that in just a second. Here's one more thing I'll try and pitch in there that I picked up end of last week. Eric Geller, cybersecurity reporter at Politico, tweeting this one. Just one I wanted to put on the record. That came up thanks to a New York Times article following the announcement of Neil Gorsuch's nomination for the Supreme Court. And he took this screen grab. I thought this was interesting. Let's squeeze this one in. In a 2002 article reflecting on Justice White's death, Mr. Gorsuch, our new nominee, of course, criticized the Senate's handling of judicial confirmations. Some of the most impressive judicial nominees are grossly mistreated, he said, mentioning 2 candidates for the Federal Appeals Court in Washington. Now, let me get our little outro music rolling here and give you an idea of how much time we have left to tell you this. So, some of the most impressive nominees are grossly mistreated, he said, mentioning 2 candidates for the Federal Appeals Court in Washington whom he said were widely considered to be among the finest lawyers of their generation. What is that D.C. Appeals Court? It's the D.C. Circuit, of course. One of the 2 that he mentioned was John G. Roberts, Jr., who, of course, went on to become Chief Justice of the United States. The other, one guess, Judge Merrick B. Garland, who was confirmed to the appeals court in 1997 after a long delay, but whose nomination to the Supreme Court last year was blocked by Senate Republicans. It is weird, isn't it? Of all people that Neil Gorsuch could have complained about, it happens to be that he's complaining way back when, in 2002, that Merrick Garland was unfairly treated in his nomination to the D.C. Circuit. And lo and behold, it is his unfair treatment again, which clears the path, allegedly, for Neil Gorsuch to move on to the Supreme Court. How interesting. I just wanted to get that one on the record. Now time, like I said, to hand things over to the guys on the after show. Here's what they've got in store for you. Treasury pick. Steve Mnuchin says his bank never robo-signed, but court cases, court documents, and fines levied in dozens of states say it did. Represented by the ACLU, a media watchdog group sues EPA pick Scott Pruitt to disclose his meetings with energy companies ahead of his confirmation vote.
From Daily Kos Radio
and more
on NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you for listening. How about else? It's coming up here in an example of how fear can lead to dumb decisions. A U.S.-trained scientist was deported and then became the father of Chinese rocketry. All that and plus much more coming up on the after show. Of course, the last half will be a feature with Chris Reeves once again, giving you the details